I had done scripts. I hadn't really tried any other sales systems or anything. I'd probably done a little bit of reading, and I had some retail experience in the past
Yeah.
making sales. That was about it.
Okay. No, yeah, I think that's a good thing to point out. Like what you said is actually like just having an actual real conversation with people. And I think that's where people get lost sometimes in trying to like follow these sales scripts from like these different sales gurus out there. Um,
Mhm.
One of the biggest things, I mean, that you generally miss with trying to use a sales script is how it's delivered. Like that person that wrote that script wrote it for them, like and like the way that they speak, the way that like the tonality changes, and like everything, like that's all goes into being able to deliver a good script. But something that you can reproduce more is just having a framework, and having a
Yeah.
conversation around it. And that's I think that's so important to point out here, and be able to share that with people, that it really is just comes down to like just connecting with people, having a conversation, understanding how to guide the conversation, to be
Mhm.
able to get what you want out of it, um, and get them bought into the solution, but not have it feel robotic.
Yeah, yeah, it's huge. Like it's just having that conversation and learning about them, making it about them doesn't like decrease the importance of having that framework or having that system. And if you have consistent training with your staff on that system, then that system will naturally come into that conversation.
Hmm. Yeah,
It's just
no,
like, I show up, I turn the lights on, I turn on the music, I turn on the fans, like I go through, I build rapport, I set the agenda. What I mean? It just
mhm.
has to be, you have to get reps. If not, you have to role play.
Yeah, absolutely. Were there any particular challenges that came up with like kind of getting your team on board with this, that maybe you initially weren't expecting and had to overcome?
I think I expected most of it because I had all the same ones. It was primarily just diving deeper into their why, as
Mm.
like some of my staff are men, some are women, and most of the guys, like the women, were fine with it right out the gate, and the guys were like, "This makes me uncomfortable."
Mm.
They were less comfortable having a more in-depth conversation about what somebody wants, um, than some of the women were. So that was a little bit of a hurdle I had to overcome with the guys, but it just, with regular training and just discussing it, like good leaders communicate the most important things over and over and over and over again, no matter how mundane they are. And just creating reps if they're not getting those live reps, and role playing, and then having that weekly discussion about it was pretty big. And now the current thing we're focusing on is we focus on different sales objections and coming up with solutions. That's what
Mm.
we've been going through the last few weeks.
Good. And then how you feeling like your team's like enjoying like learning this?
They do. I didn't think they would. Like, I thought it would be kind of boring. Like, and we've actually just used some of the shorter 5-step sales system videos with
Mm.
Ryan Ketchum. Um, we've even just played a couple of those in our staff meeting and then just discussed it. But then there's other times where we just review the specific step and how the step works, and then we role play that specific step. And I'll record that on Zoom, and then I plan to use that on our onboarding sequences so they can get examples of that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And how long, and I didn't ask this before, but how long have you been kind of operating in this way of allowing your team to kind of handle the sales in the evening time?
I guess I've always done it. I just haven't normally scheduled appointments specifically for them. So we really dialed this in probably when we were able to open back up in person this past, like, last June, in North Carolina. That was when we started really visiting it, and I wanted to make sure, because I had a guy that took over for me in the evenings. I always ran our Monday, Wednesday, Friday evening sessions. I had somebody who did Friday evenings for me, and the new guy I hired took over Tuesdays and Thursdays and Fridays, and I gave him my Mondays and Wednesdays during COVID for the virtual stuff. So when
Mm.
we went back in person, and now he's the main guy that's there in the evenings, he needed to be trained in sales, and we just took it as a whole staff to go back into it.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So before we move on from the sales thing, like last thing I wanted to kind of hit on is just seeing if you can share any possible insights within the actual sales conversation. Have you felt like anything has changed in the way that the conversation goes with the prospect? Are there new hurdles you're finding within the conversation, or has it pretty much been normal, and no real change in people's behaviors within that conversation?
I mean, for me, the biggest change was actually learning their why and then discussing their goals and then helping them understand a little bit about what we offer, and then tying it back to their why and their goals and being able to discuss with them how it's a good fit. Whereas before, it would be a lot of building rapport and then a lot of explaining what we offer. And then it depends on the type of person you're dealing with in terms of what questions they ask. And then, telling them the price. And it'd be really, really awkward unless, you always got the people that come in that it's just, they know what they're looking for. But so really just following that framework, which for me has kind of been dialed into rapport, why, goals, and then asking for the sale essentially.
Okay.
But having the opportunity to build value.
You don't feel like there's been any, I guess you'd say more friction with getting people to move forward with you? Like, you don't feel like the pandemic has necessarily affected that?
No, if anything, it just gives us a common talking point to discuss. It makes it easier to build rapport. And if I feel like anything's weird or awkward, I just continue building rapport. I think some people struggle with that. Like after you say, like, how was your weekend? What do you do for a living? Like, I just keep asking questions. Just keep going and going. And I know it's not supposed to be that long of a part of the conversation, but it de-escalates the conversation, helps people feel more relaxed and comfortable.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I'm sure it's different for each person. I mean, I'm sure there's some people where you feel that rapport is built a lot faster, and you don't need to keep asking, and you can keep moving on. And then there's people that obviously it's a little bit, you have to ask more questions to get to that point where you feel like, okay, we've established some common ground here.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can move forward. But okay, so I mean, that's great to know that like you really don't feel like this past or the current things that people have gone through, it really hasn't necessarily changed their buying behavior. Probably just comes down to a lot of, again, like what you brought up before, the belief that the person controlling the conversation, has going into the conversation. So I think like somebody that probably is going into the sales conversation concerned or worried that this person won't sign up because of this or that, whatever, then that's probably obviously going to affect the conversation.
Yeah, I think all of the worry, the concern takes place before they ever get in the building. So even if they become a lead, that would be dealt with in the conversation with the lead in the process of scheduling usually.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it all worked out with COVID specifically.
Awesome. All right. So, I mean, just to quickly recap that. I mean, obviously, I think for you guys listening, the biggest takeaways to grab from implementing this sales process is obviously having a solid and proven framework to how you guide the conversation and keeping it like a human interaction. And then the power of consistently working on this in role play, and how that like just ingrains it into you and becomes second nature.